3 years ago, my fiance started a 3-year lease on this 2021 Kona EV SEL. So this is the base model that was available in 2021. So her lease is up on this tomorrow. We're gonna be bringing it to Key Hyundai of Manchester, Connecticut to return it. Now, I have not driven this car very much, and she has only driven it for 2 years. My mother took the 3rd year of the lease, and I've maybe driven it a handful of times. So I cannot speak about this car from a ton of experience, but today, in this video, we're gonna do a walk around. We're gonna take a look at how it's held up over 3 years. We'll do an efficiency and range test on this because I never ended up doing one on this car back when we first got it because I wasn't planning on being the Ioniq guy at the time. And we'll just talk a little bit about the car in general. So if you guys are interested in how a 3-year-old Hyundai EV is held up, then stay tuned. So let's begin by talking about the origins of this Kona electric. So back in June of 2021, we were looking at replacing her aging 2008 Volvo S60 that she had gotten handed down from her parents. It was just starting to have a lot of issues and needed a lot of work, and we wanted to get rid of it while it still had a little bit of value. And if you might remember back in those times, used car values were really good, even those older ones. So I had no experience with EVs at that point in my life. If you'll remember back to summer of 2021, the Ioniq 5 had just been announced, the Kia EV6 had not been announced. There was just not a whole lot from Hyundai Kia Genesis in terms of EVs. There was this or the Niro EV, and then there was the original Ioniq EV, which had a pretty low range. I think it was about 150, 200 miles tops, but that car is still one of the most efficient EVs ever made that was in any sort of mass production. People would regularly see over 5 miles per kilowatt hour with that thing, and it did have decent range for having a pretty small battery pack. But it wasn't quite enough for what we wanted in our first EV, so that's why we settled on the Kona. And it just so happened at the end of June, there were a bunch of 4th of July specials going on, and this thing was available for a steal. So she was able to lease this for about, I think, $230 per month, and that included all the taxes, title, fees, and everything, with $2,000 down from the trade-in of her Volvo. Now, at that time, she was commuting from central Connecticut all the way to Providence on a daily basis, which, depending on which route she took, was between 120 and about 160 miles. So during the wintertime with range loss, we knew that we needed something with a bigger battery pack and bigger range. So that's why we ended up settling on the Kona as well. So it was a 36-month lease, 12,000 miles per year. And turning it in, we ended up only putting on just under 30,000 miles. My mother doesn't drive a whole lot, so that last year we didn't put a ton of mileage on it. But in that first year, we definitely went over that 12,000 mile allowance with that commute to Providence. So it ended up working out almost perfectly. 10,000 miles per year would have been ideal. We would have just barely hit that mark. All in all, it's been a terrific experience. This car has been super reliable. We've had 0 issues with it whatsoever. It's been garage kept for the full 3 years, so it hasn't sat out in the rain, it hasn't sat out in the snow. The paint still looks great, but let's take a walk around it and I'll show you guys how it has held up overall. So starting out with the back end here, no real major damage going on. You can see the original mounting screws for the license plate are absolutely corroded to crap. Glass is held up well, a couple nicks here and there, but nothing too major. You can see some scratching on the fenders here, but nothing too bad. The paint has held up really well. There's not many scratches on it, just some micro scratches here and there. And then because this is the base model, there's no sunroof, so you just get that solid black roof, which I think is a nice touch on this base model. It looks really sharp. Kind of looks like it has an all glass roof, but it actually doesn't. I can't really tell if this plastic here has faded or not. The car still has the original Nexen Enpris AH8 tires. Because this is a front wheel drive car, the front tires are worn down a little bit more. This thing has a ton of torque delivered to the front wheels, so these things are always squeaking, always chirping. So these fronts are a little more worn down than the rears. We have been really bad about rotating the tires on this thing. I think I've only rotated them once. You can see we've got a little bit of curb rash on the front wheel. Surprisingly enough, the front end of the Kona has held up fantastically. In comparison to my Ioniq 5, there are a lot fewer rock chips going on the front end. Really, the biggest damage on the car is this little impact here. My mom drove it too far into the garage or something and she hit something and it put a little divot there. A little bit of touch-up paint on there might be able to make it a little less obvious. but we're gonna turn it in with that anyway. Now, when we had this thing here at my house, we were pretty much level 2 charging it all the time, but because my mom doesn't have a level 2 charger, she was charging it exclusively on 110 volts, but that was not a problem for her because, again, she doesn't drive a whole lot. So yeah, the exterior has held up fantastically over the last 3 years. Let's hop on the inside though and check that out. So here on the inside, it's held up pretty well. Because this is the base model, it's just filled from top to bottom with scratchy, hard plastic, and some of it has gotten a little bit worn out over the last 3 years. You can see here the plastic's a little beaten up. And then down here on the cup holders, there's also some chipping of the paint, just general wear from use. Nothing that I wouldn't expect. On the passenger door panel, you can see some more scratches on that hard black plastic. Touchscreen shows no sign of wear or tear or anything. That still looks good. Now, since we got the car, there's been several updates available for this older infotainment system. I've tried multiple times with no luck in getting any of them installed. So this is still running the original software that came with it. I'm not sure exactly what has been changed since then. I really don't think there's been any major changes. This car doesn't have route planning or anything, so you're pretty much flying by the seat of your pants if you do decide to road trip this thing. The steering wheel is held up fairly well over 30,000 miles. There's no nicks, no tears or anything in the leather. I think this is leather. No excessive wear on any of the buttons on the steering wheel. Those look pretty good. The stalks still look fine. Paddle shifters look good. The mechanism here still works good. All around, just a very nice, simple interior. There's no bells, no whistles. This is a very base model EV. You don't really find those all too often anymore. All EVs now are coming pretty well equipped compared to what they did just 3 years ago. So in that regard, Hyundai and Kia have really stepped up their game with their EVs. Comparing this thing to my base model Ioniq 6 SE, this is just so much more basic. That car has so many more features compared to this base model, so really glad to see that Hyundai has been continually bringing a lot more value to all of their cars. The fabric seat here still looks just as good as the day we got the car. There's virtually no wear on it. If there's one thing that can be said about fabric seats is that they do not wear very poorly like some fake leathers do, and even real leather for that matter. Now, despite not having any kids or dogs that are getting in the back seat, there still is a little bit of damage here on the back of the driver's seat. The seats have pretty much had nobody sitting in them since we got it, so I wouldn't expect those to show any signs of wear. Also a little bit more damage here on the door panels, but all in all, it's kind of stuff you would expect after 3 years with a car. Here in the cargo area, pretty much no damage at all. We haven't really hauled much of anything in this car. It's basically just been a commuter for the last 3 years. Now, she didn't really care that this didn't have every bell and whistle. She wasn't accustomed to them anyway, driving a 2008 Volvo. So it wasn't a big deal that we didn't get the upper trim of the car, but if you are somebody who does want some of those more niceties, you might want to look at the upper trim of the Kona. I think one of my biggest issues with the car is the fact that it is not available with all-wheel drive. Putting all the power to the front wheels on this thing is really annoying sometimes, because if you mash that throttle just a little too much, those front tires just spin, even with traction control on. I find that if you drive this in any mode other than eco mode, they just chirp almost nonstop. It's just spinning those tires. Sure, if you like that and you want to have fun doing that, go for it. But when you're just commuting, you really don't want to have to deal with that all the time. So I think if they had a rear motor in this thing would have been so much better. Now, because when we bought this car, I wasn't intending on starting a YouTube channel. We never did an efficiency or range test with this thing, so why don't we do that now? We'll take this thing out and see what this thing can do on the highway at about 73, 74 miles per hour. All right, so we're heading out on the highway. We're gonna do my typical range/efficiency test route. We'll see what the efficiency is and extrapolate that to what the actual range of the vehicle will be. It's a nice day out. It's currently 80 degrees. I've got climate control set to auto, 72 degrees. This doesn't have multiple levels of auto like the Ioniq 5 or 6 does. So we're just gonna leave it in auto. I've got it in eco mode, and we've got plenty of range right now. It's estimating 191 miles, but we'll take it out onto the highway. I'll set the cruise control to 73 probably, and we'll head out and then back on a little loop. This car does only have standard cruise control. It doesn't have adaptive cruise control or anything fancy like any of the newer EVs from Hyundai or Kia do. So we're getting on the highway here. I'm gonna turn regen down to level 0 and we will come up to speed. And I will reset the trip computer so that we get an accurate efficiency reading. And we will go ahead and set cruise control to 74. The first thing you notice when getting in the Kona electric on the highway is just how loud it is in here. It doesn't sound like there's any sound deadening whatsoever. This is a gas car first, so they probably kind of skimped on that sound deadening material, which is rather unfortunate. I've never been in the ultimate trim of the Kona from this time period. I would hope that it has more sound dampening because in here it is just pretty loud. I would not want to be in this car for a long road trip. You also have no lane centering or anything here, so this is a very manual, hands-on type of driving EV. And there's nothing wrong with that. A lot of people don't want to give up that control to subsystems in the car. They want to have full control. So if you're into that, then getting a used 2021 Kona EV might be great for you. You know, part of me kind of wishes that I took this car on a bit of a road trip at some point just to experience what EVs of yesteryear were like with pretty slow charging speeds of like 75 kilowatts with this car. I think that would have been interesting and made me really appreciate current technology like in the Ioniq 5 and 6. It's definitely not the most comfortable car. I've got the seat as far back as I possibly can put it, and I would really like it to go maybe another 4 inches further back. And at that point, there is basically no rear seat room. It basically makes this thing a 2-seater. So I understand why they don't allow it to go back any further, but for me, I'm just not super comfortable driving this car. Maybe the passenger seat goes further back, but at least the driver's seat, I can't get as comfortable as I would like to. So I could definitely do it around town, but I wouldn't want to drive this thing for any amount of time over, say, an hour or two. All right, so we're about to finish up here, just a little over 48 miles. So 48.5 miles, 3.6 miles per kilowatt hour, 40 minutes total. Not too bad. Even there. So that is pretty impressive. 3.6 miles per kilowatt hour puts this only second behind my Ioniq 6 SE rear-wheel drive in terms of highway efficiency at about 73 miles per hour. That's very impressive, and you consider the fact that this car does have a smaller battery pack compared to the Ioniq 6, and this thing can still do 230 miles at those speeds. That's pretty dang good. It's a little unfortunate that Kona Electric was never a big seller here in the United States. They never really released this car in all the states, so I think it was only available in about 13 states. And if you guys have seen any of my videos on the new redesigned Kona Electric, you'll know that I'm a big fan of this car. The size is great for a small vehicle. I will say the ground clearance on it is not fantastic. You can see just how low that battery pack dangles below the floor of the car. Really not a big fan of the electric badging they put on it. All the more reason to be singled out on the road. I don't like that. I like to remain kind of under the radar in that regard. So let's talk about the lease return process. So we've been getting paperwork in the mail saying the lease is ending. What do you got to do? Do you want to trade it in for a new Hyundai, or do you just want to trade it in and get rid of it? Or do you want to buy it out yourself and keep the car and finance it or pay cash or whatever? So I did get a quote for buyout of this car, and it was about $21,000, $22,000. Now, going on KBB and looking on cars.com, these cars are not going for anywhere near $21,000. So the idea of buying this and selling it myself was completely off the table. I would have considered it had it been closer to like $20,000, but there's a $3,000 delta there, and I'm not going to take that risk. Now, if Hyundai decides to take a loss on this and then to just sell it for whatever they can get for it, I mean, if you can get this thing for $18,000, $19,000 and you qualify for the federal used EV tax credit, which I think is $4,000, you can get this thing for about $15,000. And to me, that is an absolute steal. I mean, if you want a cheap commuter car, low cost of ownership, this is the car to get. I mean, we have put nothing into this thing over the last 3 years. No fluids, no tires, no nothing. And it's worked every day with not a single problem. So here's my take on the 2021 Kona Electric. If you want cheap, easy, maintenance-free, basic commuting, this car is awesome for that. If you want a road tripping beast, do not get a Kona Electric. This thing only charges at about 75 kilowatts. So to fill this thing up from 10 to 80% on a road trip is at least 45 minutes, more than double, almost triple what an Ioniq 5, Ioniq 6, or any other modern Hyundai, Kia, Genesis product can do. But if all you're ever gonna do with this car is charge it at home, I think this is a great option. So if you are interested in a used Kona Electric, take a look on cars.com, take a look on Carvana. These things are starting to pop up for really good deals. So anyway, guys, if you liked today's video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already done so. Check out my store at ioniqguy.com for cool accessories for your Hyundai, Kia, or Genesis EV. And as always, I will see you guys in the next one. Take care, everybody.